Imagine turning like a quick 10-minute drive into a grueling 40-year nightmare.
Oh man, yeah, that's literally the worst possible detour.
Right. I mean, you miss one exit, you ignore the GPS, and suddenly you're miles off track. You're navigating hostile territory, just wondering how a really straightforward trip derailed so spectacularly.
It's the ultimate cautionary tale, you know,
Yeah.
taking the scenic route for all the wrong reasons.
Exactly.
Because physically, this journey should have taken, well, maybe a matter of weeks or
Yeah.
months, even at a walking pace with a massive population. But instead, it stretches across 4 entire decades.
Yeah, we are talking about the children of Israel and their infamous geographical detour from the wilderness of Sinai to the promised land of Canaan.
A classic story. But there's so much beneath the surface.
For sure. So today's deep dive is an exploration of the underlying mechanics of that delay. We want to look at why it happened. And we are examining the May 4th through 10th lesson material titled Rebel Not Ye Against the Lord, Know Their Fear.
But we're doing it in a pretty unique way today.
We are. We're unpacking it through a really unconventional lens. We're looking at a song titled I Have Not Forgotten You, which is amazing because it weaves over 30 specific scriptural references from the book of Numbers directly into its lyrics.
It's quite a feat of songwriting, honestly. And the most compelling aspect of this song, for me anyway, is its narrative anchor.
Right, the perspective it takes.
Exactly. It's written entirely from the first-person perspective of God, speaking directly to the Israelites. So it offers this incredible window into the divine mindset.
Which you don't usually get in just a standard historical recap.
No, you really don't. You get the frustration, the discipline, and ultimately, this relentless mercy extended toward a deeply flawed people.
And okay, let's unpack this because the sources provide something completely fascinating along with those lyrics. We have 4 completely distinct musical arrangements of the exact same words.
Yeah, 4 totally different vibes.
Totally. You've got Tabor Ashes Manna 2, which is this rich, soulful, black gospel arrangement. Then there's Tabor Do 1, which is a really gentle, acoustic youth conference style.
That one is so soothing.
It really is, just perfect for deep spiritual reflection. Then you have Tabor's Fire 1, a soaring, classic Christian worship anthem, meant for sing-alongs. And finally, Tabor's Fire Tide 1.
Oh, the rock track.
Yeah. It's this thunderous Trans-Siberian Orchestra-inspired high-energy arrangement. And taking the exact same message and filtering it through these different musical genres, it actually changes how we perceive the Israelite struggles.
It absolutely does.
It's kind of like taking the exact same movie script, but giving it to 4 vastly different directors. The dialogue is identical, but the emotional impact just hits you in completely different ways.
That's a great analogy. And what's fascinating here is that whether you're listening to a soothing youth choir or a booming orchestra, the core thematic anchor remains the same.
Yeah, that first-person voice.
Yes. It's the divine voice of God reaching out to a struggling people. So rather than just reading these lyrics like a dry textbook, we can trace the collapse of their journey through the music itself.
Let's do it. So, moving into the lyrics, this massive detour doesn't start with a giant invading army, right?
No, not at all.
It begins quietly, right inside their own camp, with something as mundane as their daily breakfast.
Yeah, it's wild. But the slow erosion of faith usually begins with a loss of gratitude for the present moment.
Wow, that's really profound.
Well, the song captures it perfectly. The lyrics in verse 1 open by describing dusty feet, dusty spirits, and notes that the murmuring won't cease.
So there's this underlying grumbling happening.
Exactly, and God points out that he's providing dew from heaven every morning, manna to the soul. That maps directly to Numbers chapter 11, verse 9.
He's literally dropping a miraculous food source from the sky every single night just to ensure their survival in a barren wasteland.
Right, but the lyrics follow that up with, but the craving wins them over and the fire takes its toll.
Ah, the craving, because the book of Numbers describes a faction within the camp yielding to these old cravings. They're actually weeping because they miss the fish, the cucumbers, the melons, and the garlic they used to eat back in Egypt.
It's crazy to think about.
It is. They are actively romanticizing the very place that enslaved and brutalized them simply because the food had more flavor.
Yeah, but we see a profound psychological mechanism at play here,
Mhm.
Freedom is incredibly demanding.
How so?
Well, slavery in Egypt involved horrific physical labor, obviously, but it offered psychological predictability. They didn't have to wonder where their next meal was coming from. Their masters handled that.
Right, the choices were made for them.
Exactly. Out in the wilderness, survival requires a daily, active exercise of faith. And when the reality of that daily reliance sets in, human nature kind of recoils,
Hmm.
we often prefer a miserable certainty over an uncertain freedom that requires us to actually trust God.
Wow. And this is where listening to the Black Gospel arrangement, that Tabor Ashes Manna 2 version, adds such a visceral layer to the text.
Oh, definitely.
Because that specific genre was born out of profound communal suffering and the real yearning for deliverance. When you hear a soulful gospel choir singing about the dusty spirits and the struggle between the daily manna and the toxic cravings,
It just hits different.
it really does. It emphasizes the heavy, lived-in reality of a marginalized people trying to unlearn generations of slavery. It doesn't sound like a dry historical account. It sounds like an agonizing human struggle happening right now.
And that struggle has severe consequences. The lyrics go on to mention Tabora's fire and the graves of craving.
Which are direct references to Numbers 11, right?
Yes. Numbers 11 recounts how the fire of the Lord burned among the camp at a place they named Tabora, and then later a plague strikes those who yielded to their lusts.
Over the quail, right.
Exactly. And they named that place Kibroth Hattava, which literally translates to graves of craving.
Man, Graves of Craven, what a name.
Right. It serves as a permanent physical monument to the destructive power of prioritizing our immediate physical desires over our long-term spiritual liberation.
So, what does this all mean for the camp? Because once that baseline murmuring infects the general population, it doesn't take long for the dysfunction to move up the chain of command.
No, it spreads like a virus.
The crisis evolves from a complaint about the menu to a direct attack on leadership. In verse 2, the lyrics shift to address Moses' own brother and sister.
Miriam and Aaron.
Right. The song says, Aaron and Miriam rose to challenge even me, with 7 days of leprosy, a lesson clear to see. In Numbers 12, they start questioning Moses' prophetic authority. They're essentially asking, why does Moses get to call all the shots if the Lord also speaks through us?
Yeah, they're conflating personal revelation with prophetic authority.
Yeah.
It is totally true that God can inspire anyone, but Miriam and Aaron are using that truth to make a power grab.
Right, it's driven by ego.
Exactly. They're operating out of ego and a desire for status. And what is brilliant about the song's phrasing here is how it frames God's immediate defense of his prophet.
Oh, I love this part of the lyrics.
It's so good. Spoken as God, the lyrics say, "My prophets walk in meekness, they hear me through the dream. But with Moses I speak mouth to mouth. Not all are what they seem."
Okay, so wait, I have to push back here for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Calling Moses meek feels like a glaring contradiction. I know Numbers 12.3 states Moses was the very meekest man on the face of the earth, but this is the same guy who marched into Pharaoh's court, demanded the release of an entire nation, called down devastating plagues, and parted the Red Sea.
Yeah, he was intense.
Right. How is that guy considered meek? We usually equate meekness with being timid, passive, or easily pushed around. Moses was clearly none of those things.
That's a huge cultural misunderstanding, and it really strips the word of its actual power.
Okay, lay it on me. What does it actually mean?
So the ancient Greek concept of meekness, the word is praus, was often used to describe a wild stallion that had been broken and trained for war.
A war horse.
Exactly. The horse hasn't lost any of its immense power or fire, right? It has simply brought that power under the absolute control of its master.
Oh, wow. That changes everything.
True meekness is power under control. Moses didn't perform those miracles through his own ego or strength. He did them because his will was entirely submissive to God.
That totally reframes the entire conflict with his siblings. When Miriam and Aaron attack his character, Moses doesn't even bother defending himself.
Because a meek person doesn't need to protect their own pride.
Right. He just leaves his reputation entirely in God's hands.
And God responds decisively. He descends in the pillar of the cloud and publicly validates Moses, stating that while he might speak to others in visions, with Moses, he speaks mouth to mouth.
And then the leprosy happens.
Yes, Miriam is struck with leprosy for 7 days as a physical manifestation of her internal rebellion. It is a stark reminder that ambition and pride have no place in spiritual leadership.
And going back to the music, if you listen to the classic Christian worship anthem arrangement, Towers Fire 1, during the section, the musicality just perfectly captures that divine validation.
Oh, worship anthems are so good at that.
They really are. They're designed to be majestic, building to these massive unifying crescendos. Hearing the full weight of a congregation-style choir singing with Moses I speak mouth to mouth really underscores the immovable sovereign authority of God stepping in to protect his servant.
It gives you chills. But, the internal rebellion is only temporarily quelled here.
Right. The camp is still super fragile.
Deeply insecure. And that insecurity is about to collide with their first major external threat. This is really the pivot point of the entire book of Numbers, the moment their short trip officially devolves into a 4-decade exile.
Yes, moving into section 3. Moses sends 12 spies into the promised land of Canaan to scout it out. And the song captures this perfectly. I've not made your searching easy. You scout for fat or lean. The promised land awaits you, milk and honey, pastures green.
Based directly on Numbers 13.
Exactly. The spies return and confirm the land is breathtakingly fertile, but 10 of those 12 spies bring back a report just tripping with panic.
Absolute dread.
They talk about encountering giants and massive walled cities. They literally describe themselves as feeling like grasshoppers in comparison.
They succumb to the grasshopper complex.
The grasshopper complex, I like that.
Yeah, those 10 spies are doing the math of conquest using only human variables. They look at the size of the enemy, they look at their own untrained nomadic population, and the equation simply does not work for them. They determine they will be slaughtered.
Only Caleb and Joshua push back. The scriptures note that Caleb had another spirit with him.
Yes, a totally different mindset.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. To modernize the analogy, imagine an intense corporate boardroom, right? The company is facing massive, entrenched competitors, the giants of the industry.
Right, the walled cities of the market.
Exactly. 10 of the executives throw the financial charts on the table, point to the competitors, and predict absolute bankruptcy. They are terrified. But then Caleb speaks up and says, no, we can take this market. He has a completely different vision, not because he is ignoring the data, but because his data includes a variable. The others are ignoring the backing of the ultimate CEO.
That is a perfect way to look at it. The 10 spies had total amnesia. They somehow forgot that the god who just dismantled the entire Egyptian empire with supernatural plagues could probably handle a few walled cities in Canaan.
You'd think that would be top of mind.
Right. Caleb's other spirit was a spirit that factored God into the equation. And this brings us right to the lesson title, Rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear. That comes directly from Joshua and Caleb's desperate plea to the camp in Numbers 14.
And the songwriter handled that lesson title so elegantly. I mean, instead of forcing that clunky phrase into the chorus, they dismantled it and wove the concepts organically into the verse.
It's very natural.
Yeah. The lyrics command, tremble not for giants, nor the strength of any man. Fear not the walled cities, they fall by the Lord's hand. So that covers the command to neither fear.
Right.
Then the pre-chorus warns against what happens when you rebel against your God, when your soul gives way to blame, providing the counterpart.
It creates this brilliant contrast between the negative examples of the past and the positive potential of the future.
Like when the lyrics explicitly plead, don't be Aaron, don't be Miriam.
Yes. Don't choose 40 years of haze. Look to Caleb. Look to Joshua. Walk the faithful ways.
Yeah.
But tragically, the camp refuses to look to Caleb.
They just won't do it.
No, they weep, they accuse Moses of bringing them out to die, and they actually actively conspire to elect a new leader and march all the way back to slavery in Egypt.
Just unthinkable. And that choice is what triggers the 40-year sentence. The song states, 40 years or 40 days, they amount to the same. Because they scouted the land in fear for 40 days, they are assigned a year of wandering for every day of faithless scouting.
It's a heavy judgment.
It is. And this is where that high-energy Trans-Siberian Orchestra rock arrangement, Tabra's Firetide 1, really comes into its own.
Oh, the electric guitars.
Yes. The driving guitars and thunderous percussion perfectly capture the chaotic, rebellious energy of a mob turning on its leaders and the crushing reality of the judgment that follows.
But, we have to look closely at the mechanism of that 40-year sentence. Because it's too easy to view it simply as divine retribution.
Like God's just punishing them.
Right, but the lesson material points out a much deeper purpose.
Yeah.
The 40 years in the wilderness was never about traversing geographical distance.
Oh.
No, it was entirely about closing a spiritual distance.
Oh, that's powerful.
Think about it. The older generation's identities were irrevocably tethered to Egypt. Their default response to any stress was a desire to return to their abusers. God realized that a population with a slave mentality could not inherit a promised land of freedom.
We weren't ready.
Exactly. The 40 years was an incubation period. It was the time required for a fearful generation to naturally pass away, allowing a new generation, born and raised entirely in the free air of the wilderness, to take up the mantle.
They literally had to let the trauma-bonded version of themselves die off before they could step into the promise.
That's exactly right.
Which brings us to section 4, the climax of the song, and arguably the most profound symbol in the Old Testament. So, decades pass. We arrive at Numbers 21. The older generation is still complaining about the lack of water, and unbelievably, they're still complaining about the manna. Still. The lyrics warn, don't speak ill of his manna, or in your thirst, forget to pray.
And because of this chronic, renewed rebellion, the protective hand of God pulls back just slightly, and fiery serpents enter the camp.
The venom is lethal.
Yes, the people are bitten, they finally recognize the gravity of their actions, and they beg Moses to intervene. God provides a cure, but it is an incredibly specific, deeply symbolic remedy.
Moses is commanded to forge a serpent out of brass, mount it on a pole, and raise it high above the camp. The promise is so straightforward, anyone who is bitten simply has to look at the brass serpent and they will survive.
Just look and live.
Right. And in the music, this moment is highlighted by an incredible a cappella bridge. All the heavy instrumentation drops away completely, leaving only the raw, exposed human voice singing. The fiery venom in your blood, the Messiah will heal. Look to the cross, look to his face, bow down and kneel.
It's beautiful.
It is. The songwriter completely collapses the Old Testament symbol directly into its New Testament fulfillment.
And the cross-references here are foundational. Jesus Christ himself uses this exact historical event in the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 14, to explain his own mission.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he tells Nicodemus, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. And Book of Mormon prophets like Nephi, Alma, and Helaman constantly refer back to this brazen serpent as the ultimate type or foreshadowing of Christ's crucifixion.
So the lethal venom represents the spiritual death of sin.
Exactly. And the raised serpent represents the Savior offering a universal cure.
But I have a question about this, something from the lesson material that I found really haunting.
What's that?
Well, not everyone survived. Some people were bitten, they knew the cure was available, and they just refused to look. Why on earth would someone do that?
It defies logic.
Totally. You don't have to climb the pole, you don't have to perform a grueling physical task, you don't even have to pay a toll, you just have to turn your head and look. What psychological barrier prevents someone from looking at a life-saving cure when they are agonizing in the dirt?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really comes down to cognitive dissonance and the sunk cost fallacy of human suffering.
Okay, unpack that for me.
When we are in deep pain, especially pain caused by our own foolishness or rebellion, our ego demands a complex solution. We convince ourselves that the cure must be as agonizing as the disease.
Oh, interesting.
Right. If all I have to do is turn my head to be healed, then my suffering feels meaningless. Human pride wants to earn salvation. We want a checklist, a grueling penance, a way to prove we are tough enough to survive the venom on our own merit.
I want to feel like we did it ourselves.
Exactly. The prophet Alma explicitly says that many perished simply because of the simpleness of the way.
So we reject the cure because it doesn't stroke our ego. We would rather sit in the dirt trying to suck the venom out of our own veins, feeling self-sufficient while we slowly die, rather than submit to the humility of simply looking up and accepting a free gift.
Precisely, because to look at the brass serpent requires you to stop looking at the snakes on the ground. It requires you to stop obsessing over your own wound. It demands absolute surrender to a power outside of yourself.
That is so profound.
And that is why the gentle acoustic youth conference arrangement of this song, Tabradu 1, is perhaps the most resonant for this specific moment.
The soothing one.
Yeah. When a soft, intimate voice sings the repeating chorus, I have not forgotten you, it feels like God whispering to an individual who is just exhausted from trying to heal their own snake bites. It strips away the theatricality and gets to the raw heart of the gospel.
I have not forgotten you, though the venom burned your veins. I have not forgotten you. See the cross where mercy reigns.
That's the core message right there.
It really is. The message of Numbers and the message of this music, regardless of the genre, is that God's faithfulness persists long after human faithfulness has evaporated.
Oh, wait.
He provides the manna even when we complain about the flavor. He provides the brass serpent even when we invite the venom.
Yeah.
He provided the Savior when we deserve the wilderness.
It is the ultimate testament to a God who plays the long game with our souls. He's willing to walk with us through a 40-year detour if that is what it takes to forge us into who we need to become.
Absolutely. So to wrap up our deep dive today, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Yeah, something to really reflect on. Think about the brass serpents in your own life today. When you are in your own spiritual wilderness, and a simple, faithful action is all it takes to find healing. Do you look up to the Savior? Or do you stubbornly keep your eyes focused on the snakes at your feet?